There's a new number that decides whether the federal government will lend a single dollar for your degree, and in a lot of states, it sits right around $36,000 a year. Here's how it works. If the typical graduate of your program earns less than a working adult in your state who never went to college at all, then Washington can cut that program off from federal student loans. No loans at all, in some cases, no federal money at all. Last month, the Trump administration made that official. It is a final rule out of the Department of Education, and it points one blunt question at every program in the country. Does this degree leave you better off than not going at all? Now, that is a bigger shift than it might sound, because for the first time, the federal government is openly grading degrees on whether they pay for themselves. And it's not just the sketchy corners of higher ed anymore. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I read all these filings so you don't have to. So I want to show you today what actually changed, why it's coming for a lot more schools than people realize, and what it means if you're the one deciding whether to go. And there are two open questions I want you holding on to the whole time. First, why the respectable schools are the ones quietly panicking, and two, the one thing that decides which side of this new line you land on. Now, for decades, this kind of test only applied to for-profit schools and short degree programs. The for-profit medical assistance course or the certificate mill. If their graduates couldn't earn their way out of the debt, they would lose access to federal money. Nonprofit and public schools were basically untouched. So a state university could run a program that buried its students for years and nothing happened to it. But that protection is now gone. Under this new rule, it doesn't matter whether the school is for-profit, nonprofit, or public. Whether it's a fancy private university, a giant state flagship, doesn't matter. Same test for everybody. And that's the part that has people inside these schools nervous because plenty of programs at so-called respectable institutions have never once been measured on whether their graduates actually earn. Now, here's the test itself, and it's actually pretty simple. For an undergraduate program, the typical graduate has to out-earn a high school graduate in the same state. That is the roughly $36,000 number, and it shifts state by state. For a graduate program, the bar is a bit higher, and the typical graduate has to out-earn someone who stopped at a bachelor's degree. If a school fails that bar in 2 out of 3 years, the program loses federal student loans. If they keep failing, they could lose Pell Grants also. So the entire federal grant-making apparatus is shut off to them. Now let's look at what that does to a place like Florida. Say you want to be a teacher, so you go get an education degree. Starting teacher pay in a lot of Florida districts is low enough that on paper, the typical graduate of that program might not clearly beat a high school grad in the state. And the same squeeze hits a lot of liberal arts degrees, whether it's English, history, social work. And it's because the rule just measures one thing. It measures early career paychecks. And so thousands of colleges are already in trouble, already staring down a shrinking number of 18-year-olds due to the demographic cliff. They've now got a second problem. They've got to prove their graduates earn, or they're going to lose the loans that keep the doors open. And this is moving pretty fast. The schools that could start reporting under it as early as this year, and the consequences end up affecting them starting next year. So the question becomes, where does this leave you if you're looking at law school or any degree worth real money? Law degrees as a group actually earn pretty well. The average law school graduate makes $72,000 a year, net of debt 4 years out. And at the top, a handful of schools clear $200,000 starting salaries. And so a JD beats that graduate earnings bar at almost every accredited law school pretty easily. And so if you're only asking, will law school pass the test? The answer is basically yes. But whether they pass or fail isn't really the story. The federal government just looked at all of higher education and said out loud that it's done assuming a degree is automatically worth it. They're not going to pretend that any program at any price will pay for itself by default. So the assumption to just go, it's an investment, it'll work out, is over. And for the higher debt graduate programs, the government's going to make you sign something before you enroll. It's going to be an acknowledgement that the school has to show you the debt versus earnings numbers, and you've got to formally check a box that says you saw them. Like, yes, I understand this program carries a heavy debt load. And so think about what that is. It's like a warning label on a pack of cigarettes. The federal government decided that the responsible move is to make you sign off that you know the numbers before they let you in. And of course, alongside all of this, the government has tightened how much it's going to lend graduate and professional students and put real limits on with them where there used to be none at all. And I've already covered that a lot, so I'm not going to go over it again here. But the point I want you to take away here is bigger than any one low number. From every direction, the message is the same. The days of borrow whatever and hope it all works out is over. And so the government is now grading programs based on the payoff specifically. And the people who get hurt are the ones who don't look. You can't just pick a school based on vibes. You've got to look at the sticker price, look at the 509 reports for any American Bar Association accredited law school that you're considering. That's going to show you the typical employment outcomes, the bar passage rates, the debt, the earnings, all of that covered pretty clearly. In the 509s, you can also see the LSAT and GPA medians of the law schools that you're considering. And if you can apply to law schools where your numbers are above the medians, then you're not only likely to get in, but you'll also get significant scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. And if you want my help getting a higher LSAT score, getting more scholarship money, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a quick reference on everything logical reasoning and reading comprehension. You can grab that at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Again, the link's below the video, pinned in the chat in my bio as well. Now, a lot of people are asking me whether next law school admission cycle will be harder. And if we look at the numbers, applicants finished this cycle up 8.5%. 9 months earlier, that same number was 25%. And the number dropped over the course of the cycle because of how the counting works. And almost nobody applying to law school actually understands it, so they panic at the worst possible moment, and they make decisions out of fear that could cost them a scholarship, a school, sometimes a whole year of their life. And so for the T14, for the T30, people are wondering, is this thing finally going to break, or will it just keep getting worse forever? Now, I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005. I've watched a lot of these cycles come and go. I'm going to give you my actual read with the actual numbers, because there's a number coming out in September that's going to scare the life out of every applicant watching this. I'll tell you what it's going to say and why it's not telling you the truth. And there's also a change happening on the August LSAT in a couple weeks that's going to make your LSAT score worth more than it's been in years. Most people applying have no idea it's coming. But first, let's start with why everyone's scared. Because the fear is not irrational. For 3 straight cycles, things have gotten worse. The 2024 to 2025 cycle ended with applicants up 18.3%. Then this past cycle finished up another 8.5% on top of that. And so applicants are up more than 29% in 2 years. So for every 100 people who wanted a seat 2 years ago, there are now 129 people fighting over those same seats now. And so if the last 2 years felt like a bloodbath, you were not imagining it. The medians climbed. Schools that used to take a 165 started wanting a 168. Scholarship money also got harder to get. People with numbers that would have walked into a T14 5 years ago got waitlisted, then dinged. I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. But the scary number, that one that made people lose their minds, that came out early in the cycle, and law school applicants front load. More and more people apply earlier and earlier. They send in their apps in September, October, November because they've been told correctly that applying early gives you an edge. Rolling admissions rewards those who apply earlier. And so the pool that shows up at the front of the cycle is enormous, and it's also relatively stronger. And so the year-over-year comparison in the fall looks terrifying, but then the rest of the cycle happens. People apply in the winter, in the spring, people who needed to retake, they're a weaker pool, and they file at a slower pace than the early stampede. And so the gap closes. So month by month, the increase drops over time. 25% up becomes 20%, then 15, then 12. And by June, it's down to only 8.5% up. So the earliest, most eager slice of the pool got counted before everyone else had applied. There's a logical fallacy in here somewhere. And so in late September, we're going to get the first real volume summary for the 2027 cycle, the first hard data. And based on the front-loading trend, which gets stronger every year, that number is probably going to come in around 20% up, maybe higher. And so you'll see that your stomach's going to drop, screenshots everywhere, people saying it's over, we're cooked, this cycle is Armageddon. So people then rush their applications they should have spent more time on, and then take acceptances they shouldn't have accepted because it felt like the last shot. That early 20% is just the front loaded portion of the cycle. It's not reflective of the entire applicant pool. So I think this coming cycle is going to end up roughly flat, somewhere between up maybe 1-5% max when it finally closes. That's my read, not a fact carved in stone, a prediction but not destiny. If that happens, it's a bigger deal than it sounds though, because for the past few years, the cycles have done nothing but climb, always up year after year after year. And so if the cycle lands basically flat, that itself is news. Now, is there a case that I'm wrong? Yeah, there is. I mean, I've gone back and forth on this for the past couple of months, so I want to give you the strongest version of my predictions here. Let's start with the money. First year pay at top firms just went up to $235,000 as a base salary. With the bonuses, a brand new first year could clear north of $255,000. Every time that number goes up, law school looks more and more like a lottery ticket to a 22-year-old who's great with words and hates math. That's going to pull people in. The same thing happened to med school. Then there's also the economy. White-collar hiring is pretty soft right now, in part due to AI. And so when the job market's ugly, grad school applications go up because grad schools where smart people go to wait out a bad economy. MBAs are not worth what they used to be. They've lost a lot of their shine. And there have been real headlines about grads from top business schools struggling to land jobs. And some of them choose law instead. They pivot. There's also all the layoff panic in tech and finance due to AI. Then you've got a political climate pushing people towards law as a way to actually do something. So there's a lot of fuel directing people towards law. Now, these forces are real. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. And so they put a floor under law school volume. That's why I think law school apps are not going to decline. Flat at the worst. I'm not predicting a crash here. Anyone telling you applications are going to fall off a cliff is probably selling you something. But we've seen this happen a couple times already. I mean, look at the law school applicant surge after the 2008 financial crisis, bad economy. Everybody ran to law school as the safe move, and applications shot up to an all-time high right around 2010. And then it peaked. And then over the next 5 years, applications fell about 37%. Now, back then, it didn't just plateau, it collapsed. And there was a specific reason. There was an employment scandal. Schools got exposed for hiding how bad the job numbers really were. The media caught on to it, and the bottom fell out. This time, the top of the market money is real, and it's rising, so I don't think you're going to get the same crash. But the shape of the thing, the surge that peaks and stops climbing, it's already happened once. Surges don't rise forever. There's a limited pool of people that law schools can source from, especially due to the coming demographic cliff. Now, there's the pool in general, then there's the T14. The top 14 law schools, the so-called Ivy League of law schools, including Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, NYU, it's not going to get easier to get into those schools because that's the top slice where the big law money lives, the $235,000 salaries. And as long as those jobs exist, people are going to fight over them. So even in a flat cycle, the T14 is going to remain brutal to get into because the people gunning in for it are the highest scorers in the country, and they're not going anywhere. But the other schools, look at, say, the beyond the T14, the T30, for example, there's going to be some space there. It's going to be easier to get into those schools because they're the ones catching the applicants who don't quite clear the top. If the total stops climbing, their medians stop climbing right along with it. And so they're going to have to fight more to get those strong applicants. And so it'll be competitive, probably not more competitive than this past cycle, which was the most brutal one in probably 15 years or so. But volume's only part of this. The other half is the number that you actually control. There's a change coming to the August LSAT that a lot of people aren't aware of yet. Starting with the August LSAT, it goes back to in-person only with rare exceptions in a real testing center. The same scoring scale, 120 to 180. And if you look at what happened to LSAT scores the past few years, a lot of score inflation. A 170 used to put you in the 97th percentile. Now it sits closer to the 95th percentile. A 175 used to be, a 99th percentile used to be a 173. Now it's a 175. And so, short version, score inflation, more people in the pool with top LSAT scores. And some of that is better prep, genuinely. But some of it is because it was easier to take the LSAT at home, a more comfortable environment. There's also the cheating scandal as well. People cheating on the remote LSAT. And so back to in-person, where it's locked down, the conditions are standardized, they're controlled. It's going to be harder for scores to inflate the same way. I do think score inflation will continue, but I do think the return to in-person will mitigate a lot of that. It will reduce a lot of that. And so if high scores get a bit rarer, then a real 170 goes back to meaning what a 170 used to mean. It separates you from the pack more. And so for a couple of years there, it felt like everybody had a 172 and it stopped feeling like an edge. And that's going to reverse. And a top score not only affects whether you get in or not, it also affects what you pay once you're in. Your LSAT score determines your scholarship money. That could be tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars in law school tuition, whether you pay sticker, whether you get half off your tuition, whether you get a full ride. And of course, your GPA also plays a role, but by the time you're applying or even looking at law school applications, your GPA is already probably pretty fixed. But your LSAT score, that's the one number you still have plenty of room to improve significantly, and you can also retake the LSAT. Law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take the highest LSAT score on your record, meaning there is no downside to retaking the LSAT. If you do worse, no big deal. The previous high score still counts. If you retake, now you've got a higher score on your record. It can only help you out. And even a few points more can lead to getting into better law schools, getting more scholarship money, or both. And if you want my help getting that LSAT score up, wherever point you're at in your prep, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a quick reference on everything logical reasoning and reading comprehension, a free PDF download that you can grab at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Again, links in my bio. Happy for you to check that out. Now, on the LSAT, 4 questions can be worth $150,000. And that's not a metaphor. The gap between a 164 and a 168 is about 4 questions. And I've watched those 4 questions decide whether a student pays full tuition at a top 30 law school or attends the same school on a full ride. Same classrooms, same professors, same degree. One graduate starts her career with a payment that looks like a mortgage. The other starts free. So look at what you're holding. It looks like a test prep book, but underneath it's a money book. Your LSAT score is one of the most valuable numbers you'll ever produce, and this book treats it that way. Now, the part most prep books won't say out loud. If you've been studying for months and your score won't move, you don't have an effort problem, you have a review problem. Nobody taught you how to learn from the questions you miss, because almost everyone in this industry gets paid to sell you volume. More questions, more videos, another 500-page book about one section of a test with 3 scored sections. Part 1 gets into whose fault that actually is, and it isn't yours. And here's the part the title means literally. The methods in this book doesn't care what your The method in this book doesn't care what your diagnostic was. I've watched it work from the high 170s down into the 140s because it isn't a gift you either have or don't. It's a set of moves, and moves can be taught to anyone willing to do the reps. I won't promise you a specific number from here because I don't know you yet. What I'll promise is narrower and more useful. The ceiling you think you have is almost always the contaminated one set on a test you took without these tools. Quick introduction, I'm Steve. I've been coaching the LSAT since 2005, thousands of students, plus the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel. The first time I took this test, I scored a 152. I'd gone to an Ivy League school. I thought I was good at tests. The LSAT disagreed. A year later, I scored a 175, and the method that got me there is the method in this book. It's also the reason this became my career. This book exists for 2 reasons, and you get them straight. Reason 1, to raise your score. The complete method is on these pages. I'm not holding chapters hostage for a paid course. Reason 2, I own an LSAT coaching company. Some of you will work through this book and decide you want a coach in the room while you do it. When that day comes, I'd like to be the obvious call. That is the whole business model. Give you everything, then trust that some of you will want help going faster. I'm telling you this on page 1, so you never have to squint at my motives. Nothing in here is a teaser. The method is complete on the page. What you do with it is up to you. A few things this book is not. It's not a 1,500-page tour of every question type ever administered. It's not a bag of tricks. It's a book about the few moves that actually produce points, sized by its reps instead of its theory, and written for busy people. College students, recent grads, anyone studying at 11 p.m. after a full day. It took me a year because I did everything wrong first. Done right, this is a 3 to 6 month project. The route runs in 3 parts. Part 1 figures out where you are, the 3 traps that eat most students' prep, why none of them are your fault, and a check-in that tells you honestly what to do next. Part 2 is the method, the Socratic review method, which turns the questions you miss into points you keep, and you'll run it on a real question of your own before the part ends. Then the 2 sections it feeds, logical reasoning, which is 2/3 of your score, your study schedule should know that, and reading comprehension. Part 3 puts it on the calendar and cashes it out, the laser plan that organizes your entire prep, learning, accuracy, sections, exams and endurance, and review, the test-a-day playbook, and the chapter that turns your score into scholarship money. Retakers get a chapter of their own in there too. And the back of the book works for a living. 15 straight answers to the questions students actually ask, an appendix with every instrument assembled, and a drill bank holding 58 original reps for the muscles part 2 builds. Every printable instrument in here also lives in 1 free companion workbook. Tell us where to send it at unpluggedprep.com/books, and it lands in your inbox next to you while you work. The book points you at the right sheet as you reach it. Skimming, here's the whole book in 3 points. 1, the LSAT rewards review, not volume. Drilling measures you, review changes you. Almost nobody reviews properly, and that's the entire gap between you and a top scorer. 2, logical reasoning is 2/3 of your score, 2 of your 3 scored sections. Put your hours where the points live. 3, every point is money. A handful of questions separates full tuition from a full ride. Don't study for the score that gets you in, study for the score that gets you paid. Everything else in this book is detail in service of those 3 sentences. If this is your first round with the LSAT, read straight through. The book is built in order. Tempted to jump straight to the method in Chapter 6? I get it, and I'd rather you didn't. Chapter 3 is where you find out which trap is currently eating your hours, and the method lands harder once you've seen yours. If you're a retaker carrying scar tissue from a previous attempt, you've earned a shortcut. Take the check-in at the end of Part 1, then head straight for Chapter 11, which was written for you. One request before you start. Read this book with a pen. It's going to ask you to write some things down, and the writing isn't decoration. Students who do the exercises on paper improve. The ones who do them in their head stay stuck. You'll see exactly why in Part 2. Last thing, I built a free LSAT cheat sheet that pairs with this book. Grab it at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet and keep it next to you while you work. That's everything you need before page 1. Let's go get your points. Steve Schwartz, founder, LSAT Unplugged. P.S. Yes, reason 2 means some of you will eventually work with us. But if you squeeze this book dry and never spend $1 with me, that's a win too. I wrote it for you either way. That was the first chapter of my book, Anyone Can Beat the LSAT. It'll be available for free on my website. In the meantime, if you want some free resources, you can grab my free LSAT cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. The link's below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I'm also offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Links below the video, pinned in the chat. in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. In the meantime, all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.